Greetings, sailors, and welcome to my take on what has turned out to be a bit of a PR disaster. Did you see what I did there? Bet nobody else has made that particular pun, right? Yeah. And let's just pretend that for the sake of my fragile ego. So, Thursday, here in the UK, we had the general election. The result was kind of not good as far as I'm concerned, but I guess we shall see what comes of it. But at the same time, well, there was a bit of a kerfuffle happening in Warships Land as well, because the patch came out and it was then that we knew the true extent of what was required to get your hands on this ship, the Puerto Rico. I should point out, by the way, I haven't gone completely mad and spent ridiculous amounts of money and bought it. This is from when we were testing the ship. It's a fairly mediocre game, but I won't really be talking about the game itself too much. This is just for background footage. So what's happened is, if you've been living under a rock, basically the directives that are part of the requirements to get the PR are insane. Completely bonkers. I won't go into them in detail. Jingles did quite a good look at that in his video. I think Flamu went into some of them as well. iChaser's looked at them. I'm sure there's been other people that have looked at them. So suffice it to say, it's the amount of effort that you would put in to grinding not, one, but maybe two or even three, considering the amount of credits and free XP and everything it's involved in as well. Enough effort to grind out multiple regular lines of ships with this just one single ship. On top of that, the time frame for doing that is only about a month or so. So, in other words, you have to severely no-life it to the point where it's actually unhealthy. This is one of the issues I have with how this event has been structured. If you want to get the PR for free, I mean, I think it is theoretically possible, but you have no leeway for missing any days at all, pretty much. And we've had criticism of directive-based ship grinds on that basis previously. I mean, was it the Eitel Friedrich involved grinding a lot of credits, and there was a bit of criticism about that. And then the Benham grind also was very tight time-wise, but in terms of the actual requirements, they can't really touch what this has going for it. So if you were to sit down and do it for free, you would be putting your health at risk a little bit, because it's really not a good idea to be sat down and playing games literally all day long, because that's pretty much what you would need to do, or else get multiple people playing shifts on the same account just to get through the mammoth requirements. So that's a problem. That's definitely a problem. I think that is probably the biggest part of people's problem with this. But there's another factor as well. There's the communications issue, and this is the only bit that we've had a kind of non-apology for. This has been an advantage of hanging on a couple of extra days in order to get my opinion out there. Not that I'm going to be saying anything radically different than anything else. Surprise twist! I think the event is fine, you guys. I don't know what you're complaining about. No, but seriously. The other part is that what we were given to understand from the PTS, and one of the things that Jingles particularly was pissed about, is that when he was showing it off on the PTS, that nobody bothered to correct his presumption about what it would be on the live server. That there was a very heavy implication that as a kind of Christmas New Year event, that this would be something available to everybody to some extent, and technically is, available to everybody, even if you don't have the time to do it, because you can just, of course, outright buy the thing for, what was it, like £180. It's roughly the same that in fact, I think it's even a little bit more than the Benham cost to buy outright. And if you remember, I did a video criticising Wargaming for the structuring of the Benham event. I didn't give them a free pass on that. It all got completely overshadowed by the farufara about the Naval Training Centre, which they did walk back on. But they almost kind of got a bit of a free pass when it came to the Benham, because everyone was so focused on the Naval Training Centre. And so it's maybe almost not a surprise. It's certainly a disappointment, but maybe not a surprise that we have an event that's come after that where it's not only the same level, but actually worse. Much worse. The Benham grind, it was more the tight timescales involved, whereas this, it's both the tight timescales and the sheer amount of effort you would need to put in. And that's even true if you start paying money towards it, because there are premium boosters available in the port. I should point out, by the way, love the port idea, and it's not like there isn't other good stuff going on at Christmas. We've got free steel, free containers, free coal. That's all nice. The Santa containers are not completely terrible, although there is such a big pool of ships, premium ships in the possible drops, that if you're buying them with the hope of getting a specific ship, it's kind of, it's not worth that. You're better off just buying the doubloons. But if you're after a particular rare ship and you don't already have most, if not all, of the other ships on the list, then you're not really going to be in with a good chance of getting it. But, in principle, the Christmas boxes aren't terrible. So this should have been, a good event, because, not only do we have the PR, we also have Gorizia available for slightly less onerous grinds. You only have to get the first 3 directives done, and you don't have anything like the time pressure. So the Gorizia as a tier 7 premium is going to be available to a lot more people. But the emphasis from Wargaming's marketing material was always Puerto Rico, and to the extent that we had, I'm not going to name names or anything, but we had 1 or 2 pokes from WG staff about, could we maybe get a little more coverage of the dockyard and the PR on the test server. And the dockyard in particular, I can see why they would want attention drawn to it, because it's a lovely idea, it's a lovely implementation. It shows you quite the dedication that Leicester have in terms of the research that they do, and the level of knowledge they've picked up about ships. But it's all just been completely overshadowed by the fact that they've put out the PR with pretty much explicitly the expectation that very few people are going to get it. I almost called this video "Non-Whales Need Not Apply," which, is almost as good a title as what I have come up with. Because there really is that hard limit of, it's a lot of money, and if you just simply don't have the time or the will to grind, not that you even should be contemplating grinding out for free, honestly, like I said, it simply isn't a healthy option. And frankly, the fact that they've even contemplated cramming that level of grind into a single month is utterly disrespectful to the player base. They don't value your health, or that's what you could take from this particular insanity. But basically, what I'm getting at is that people hate this kind of content. People hate this extremely hard to get gated content for the most part, especially when there's this massive paywall as well. This isn't like previous contests where X top number of 1,000 people get a ship, because, well, you can't monetize that. You can get people playing, but you're not going to get the whale money with that kind of contest, are you? It's not going to be like the was it the Kamikaze R or the Kamikaze? I can't remember. The Pearl contest they had a while back. That's not going to bring in the huge wads of cash from the people who are just not stopping to think about whether it's particularly good value for money or not. Which, objectively, it's not. It's not like it's a brilliant, amazing ship. It's okay. But on a subjective basis, it's less worth money than the Venom was if you bought it completely outright up front. And as I said at the time, I absolutely in no way, shape or form thought that a digital good was worth that much money. There's just no way it is. So, yeah, it's the whole thing has just ended up leaving many in the CCs and many in the community just with a completely sour taste in their mouth. Because it's just exploitative. And you couple that with the previous couple of ship grinds we've had, and yeah, okay, from an objective point of view, it's great that you can grind out premium stuff for free, and that there's, free XP ships and stuff like that in the game. But when you've got it coupled to this insane level of grind, and just to remind you, even if you buy premium boosters, you're still going to need to be grinding your heart out. It's just slightly less bonkers. It's kind of inexcusable. And this is why it's more than annoyed a few people as well that the non-apology apology happened, because the non-apology apology was entirely on the basis of, well, we didn't communicate this correctly. Which has left more than a few people kind of, aggrieved that there's no acknowledgement as to exactly why people are finding this problematic. Now, I will be fair to Sub-Octavian, who put this up on Reddit and I think the forums as well. He's both right and wrong at the same time when he talks about there being a miscommunication. Let's, for argument's sake, just put the insane, unhealthy grind / whale hunt to one side and say, okay, what if Wargaming had A, made a bigger thing about the Grizia, not focused so heavily on the Puerto Rico, B, been a lot clearer about the actual amount of effort that would be required and explicitly laid out the timetable that you will need to adhere to, and made it clear up front, even when it was in the test server phase, that this is a thing that was going to be aimed at very few people. And I think the reception might have been a little less sharp, but even under those circumstances, even if their intent had been much more clearly communicated, if they'd made the Grizia a much more central focus and then said, but for the really dedicated players, here's the PR, I still don't think people would have been very happy, because it still would have been an insane grind for the PR. And we know from past experience that when you create content for a game, even within the context of World of Warships, and then say, well, only a very tiny group of people are going to have this ship, that's how we've planned it out, people don't react well to that. And we saw that exactly with the original plan for the Alabama to be a ship only for super testers as a kind of reward. And there was a real fuss kicked up about that. There was a real stink about it, because this was content that almost nobody was going to get. And then we come along with the PR, and it is explicitly intended as content that almost nobody is going to get. So I think this wouldn't sit right with people, however Wargaming framed it. And there's very few of the CCs that are okay with it. There are a couple that are like, okay, it's an insane grind, but, you know, they kind of are on board with the concept. I can't really talk about how it's being received on the Russian side of things, but I imagine they're not very happy either. But for Wargaming to kind of basically turn around to the general mass of their audience and say, yeah, we've made this cool thing, but it's not for you unless you're a whale or you are prepared to spend an utterly unhealthy amount of time sat in front of a computer playing our game. There's no way that was ever going to go down well. I'm not entirely sure how Wargaming thought they were going to sell this idea, but really any one of us could have told them that it was going to backfire in their faces quite horribly. And so it has. So hopefully, free from the kind of confluence of events that happened last time with the Benham getting a free pass, hopefully Wargaming will go away and take some lessons from this as to how to design these things in future. And I have suggested once again, as I did at the time with the Benham, that a much fairer way of doing these things is the kind of modular approach that's been taken with World of Tanks in the past, and that was taken with the Cossack event, where you do as many directives as you can, and then you can pay to skip the rest by buying the tokens directly. And I didn't really like putting the tokens in the containers as they did with the was it the French event? I can't remember now. I wasn't happy with that particular way of doing things because the containers were not particularly good value for money, but that's containers. It was basically just the tokens. And talking of containers that are not particularly good value for money, there's the shipbuilding ones, which don't actually give you any tokens or anything. They just let you build the collection that goes along with the PR dockyard thing. So that's just, I don't know, aimed at milking some money out of completionists, I guess. So yeah, it isn't a good trend for the game, this style of monetization. There are much fairer ways to do things. And if the game keeps going down this route, I'm going to have to seriously consider whether I still want to be associated with it, much less actually play it. Because, you know, there's levels of dirtiness when it comes to monetization. There's ways of treating people fairly, and this doesn't really seem like one of them. Gating something this heavily, with the expectation that, you know, like single-digit percentage of the player base will ever get their hands on it. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess, really, and I really don't like how they have gone about this. The handling of the communication afterwards has been a little substandard. I mean, Lord Zath put out a video today, for example, where he said he'd sat down for 2.5 hours with spreadsheets to try and figure out how he was going to have to grind the thing, and just injecting that level of complexity into a nominally free grindable ship alone is that's too much. It's just too much. And then you stick on the insane level of grind on top of that, and it's like, okay, we all could have told you this was coming, but here we are now, and hopefully some lessons will be learned from it. So I don't think there's really much more for me to say. I would recommend you go and check out other people's videos if you want some gory details on quite how bonkers the grinds are, and certainly the later directives, they don't even mesh. You need to do, you know, fire damage and setting fire ribbons in separate classes, and you need to tank absurd amounts of damage in certain nation lines of cruisers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's ultimately not worth it. It's just not, the PR's not worth that level of effort, it's not worth your time, and it's not worth that much money. Although, you know, clearly some people disagree because there's some around on the servers already. People have been clearly willing to pay stupid amounts of money. I mean, hell, if nothing else, and I've covered this previously, this was a big issue when Wargaming was moving much more towards bundling every new premium vehicle that came out. Some people in, you know, countries that have much lower average levels of income are just going to be utterly priced out entirely. They're just not going to have a hope unless they have a, you know, fairly well-paying job. So it's going to price out a massive number of people. If Wargaming wants some kind of event where they're only expecting a really limited number of people to get a ship, they can surely do it in a way that pisses less people off. Or even better, they can abandon that line of thought entirely. If they want some kind of content that is for the players that have been playing longer, or the dedicated players, and there are surely better ways of doing it than this, because this was just a mess. It wasn't even a car crash, it was a shipwreck. So hopefully you have found this analysis, this editorial video interesting, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.